So first off then, I suppose, who am I? I am Mike Steer, I am a geek, and I'm also head of tech at Reflect Digital. So I basically head up a team of 4 developers doing all the website stuff. I also look after basically everything technical within the agency. I've been there about 5 years. And we kind of manage, within the agency, we manage everything from kind of new builds, we take on existing website builds, we build e-commerce websites, we build WordPress sites, we kind of build a bit of everything really. It's pretty cool. So what I'm going to do to start with is just basically have a run through of how I kind of got into development. It's a bit of an obscure route, but just to give you a basis that not everyone's route is going to be the same. And then I'll go into things that might be useful for you guys when you're thinking about going into a career of development. Before I do start, what's your kind of general knowledge in terms of development? Have any of you done CSS, HTML, JavaScript, a little bit, yeah? So, okay, not too many blank faces, hopefully. So just quickly on me then, I'll rattle through this because I'm sure you don't really care. This is a picture of me when I was very young. It was a long time ago. That was my first computer. So much like in the previous presentation, I think at the start, they were very different beasts to what you guys were dealing with now. There was no internet, obviously, but it did at a very early age spark something in me that I knew that I wanted to work with something in IT. When I left school in '95, I didn't do any kind of GCSEs or anything in IT because there just wasn't any at that point. They started introducing computers, but they only did very basic. I don't even think Word was a thing at that point. And again, the IT, it was still very much in its infancy. When I left, there was only 23,000 websites in the world. Now there's only for 1.5 billion, and that's probably far more than that now. Going into a computer, or at least an internet-based career, wasn't really an option, or not one that I was aware of at the time, because it was still in its infancy. So for me, I knew I wanted to do something in IT. So after a brief dalliance into leisure and tourism, I did a 2-year course at college to do basically an IT course. For the next 20 years or so, I dabbled in different IT jobs around the country, working at some really cool places. I worked for the MOD, I worked for the company that invented the little blue pill, but none of them really grabbed my attention in terms of what I was learning. I'd learned most of what was needed to do the job within a relatively short space of time, and then it got stale and I got bored, and I thought, I'm going to be working for another 20, 30 years. I don't want to be doing something that bores me. So I need to find something that basically I'm going to enjoy doing. We spend most of our time at work. Let's try and find something that really kind of engages me and I enjoy doing. So by fluke, I helped one of my friends basically do some work on a website. I mostly broke it, but it did kind of show me that I actually enjoyed doing it, and maybe it's something that I could turn into a bit of a career. So I thought, right, how do I turn this kind of hobby into something that is going to basically last me for the rest of my working life? So I thought, right, okay, let's work out how I do this. I need to start looking at different careers, but I don't really know what to do because it's relatively new to me. And then I was kind of overwhelmed by the sheer amount of stuff that was out there in terms of different courses, different careers, different paths you could go down, different languages, and I was like, I don't know where to start. So I kind of had to look at it a bit more kind of analytically and kind of go, right, what do I want my job to be, and let's try and fit in what I need to do that to get to that job. So I kind of made myself a bit of a list. Salary was up there, and it shouldn't ever be your only consideration, but it should be a consideration when you're thinking about jobs. Looking at something that has a decent entry salary so you can kind of live when you start there, even if it's an internship or something, but then also looking at the kind of ceiling, that there's room to grow in that career, that you're not going to hit a place and then have to try and find another career that then moves up. So something that has a decent salary expectations, basically. Looking for something that has demand. So are there that many jobs out there? You don't want to find the job. I didn't want to find a job that was so specialised that these jobs only come up once in a blue moon. You want something that's relatively recent, so when you're looking for roles, there are ones available when you're looking. But equally looking at saturation, so you don't want to find a job that is so general that there's so many people, hundreds of people applying for the same job. So you need to find a kind of sweet spot of what's out there that's unique enough that I want to do it, but is not so saturated that there's so many people. And community, this is something that Swapnil will cover in a bit more detail later, but when we talk about community, the development community is something quite unique, I think, in industry, in that there's so many collaborative people that really kind of get together and help you get to be a better developer, whether it's giving you a piece of code that means that you'll build a better application, or support in helping you solve a problem. The community is really important. Different communities will be at different sizes, so newer technology, stuff like Flutter that Google have created for building mobile applications is relatively new and it's got quite a small community. Things like PHP that have been around for decades will have quite a big community. So it's a consideration when you're looking for a specific career to think about. So I kind of worked out roughly where I needed to go into, but then I was a bit like, okay, I've got looking at different technologies I wanted to use, or different things I needed to learn. There was just, again, a plethora of different things that I needed to learn. So I was like, okay, well, let's try and break this down a bit more. Not so true as much nowadays because these are getting a bit more blurred and front end's kind of almost being separated again. And you can have roles that do cover both, but typically you'll end up with two types of developer, either a front end developer or a back end developer. Which one you choose to be will be kind of, in a way, how your brain works. If you're creative or if you're logical, it will kind of fall generally into one of the other two, or you'll be one that covers both. So from a front-end point of view, this is basically the bit where a designer will hand you a picture of a website and you turn it into a website, essentially. You make it come to life, you make the buttons move, you make the navigation work, you use JavaScript to make it interactive. It's great for visual minds and creative people because you need that flair to be given a static image and really bring it to life and really make people want to use that website. Required skills, so HTML, CSS, obviously the template to making the website, and understanding Photoshop, because you'll generally be given a Photoshop file or a Adobe XD, something like that, to be able to turn that picture into a website. And then knowledge of JavaScript is useful because it can just add an extra layer of functionalities for a website. In terms of skills, oh yeah, thank you very much. Perfect, cheers. In terms of skills, so again, there are almost an unlimited amount of things that you can learn from a front-end point of view, but again, to start with, you're looking at HTML as a very core thing. To build on that, from a CSS point of view, you've got frameworks. Frameworks basically give you some underlying code that allow you to do more. So in terms of these two, Bootstrap and Foundation, they basically give you the functionality to make responsive websites. So before these, you would have to generally code every single element of your page to work on mobile devices. These allow you to build them using these frameworks, and they will scale down automatically to give you the best representation on a mobile device. In addition to that, you've got preprocessors. These two basically allow you to write CSS in a far quicker way to be able to create variables that you can then reuse throughout the project or bundle bits of code together. And it basically allows you to just be able to write code quicker. From a JavaScript point of view, you've then got task runners. Again, looks a bit scary, but essentially these just build on less than Sass. So it's becoming less of an issue nowadays, but in a few years gone by, all the different operating systems, or the browsers rather, Internet Explorer, Chrome, Safari, would always display what your code in slightly different ways. So you get slightly inconsistencies. These guys basically help consolidate that into one piece of code that will essentially run and give you the same variations on different browsers. They also compress the code so that it's the smallest possible code that it can be, so that when you are using it on the website, the sites are loaded quick and you're not getting any delay for your users. Libraries, React, Angular, Vue are slightly more recent. jQuery has been around for a little bit longer. These essentially just build on JavaScript. They're all JavaScript libraries that give you more functionality to do more things. It may be something that you never get to use any of those, or it may be something you do kind of use some of them to a certain extent. It really depends on what you want to do. But this is kind of a front-end idea of what you might learn as a front-end developer. It will vary from site to site, but it's a kind of overview. And there's hundreds more that could be involved in here, but it gives you a kind of idea. From a back-end point of view, it's all the code that runs behind the scenes, all the stuff you don't see. So it's all security, authentication, logic, all the stuff that makes the website kind of work behind the scenes, whether you're logging into something or if you're making an order on something. It's quite good for logical, methodical people. People like taking things apart, working how it works, and then kind of putting it back together again. So an understanding of a programming language, whether it's PHP or ASP, just an understanding of a programming language is useful. Relational databases, understanding where the data is stored and how you interact with that data. And then desirable skills. So obviously all websites run on servers, so having an understanding of how those servers actually work and how you can use that code is useful. From a language point of view, these are the main ones. There are more, obviously, but understanding one of these as a core thing would be, obviously, is your starting point. They're all different in terms of how syntax works, but essentially learning one, the principles and the concepts are the same amongst them. On top of that, frameworks, similar to the front-end frameworks, you've got these, which basically give you a massive amount of code out of the box that you can then use. So if you wanted to write a login, something that you had to log into as a platform, Laravel, any of these will have the code written there. You basically just say, I want to install this login plugin. Rather than having to write every single line of code from scratch, they give you a lot of stuff out of the box, so you can basically code quicker, more consistently. It also means that if you're working on a project with someone else, they can pick it up and they know that you're using this. They can collaboratively work on it together because it's using consistent code. Package managers kind of then enhance on top of that, because they basically, for things where these frameworks don't give you specific code, if you have quite a niche requirement for something, you can use Composer or Pip to basically pull in a piece of code that someone else has written in the community. And Sortner will talk more about this, but essentially if you need, say, an Instagram feed or something, there's going to be ones out there that other people have written, you can basically pull in their code, plug it in, and then you're off and running, and then you can use that rather than having to write it again from scratch. Again, it just helps you to build better quality, quicker websites. From a database point of view, you've essentially got two options. Relational, more traditional, quite fixed in their structure, used to storing orders, that kind of thing, because it's relational, you can relate different columns together. So you can have a users table that connects to an orders table, and the information is quite easily reportable. Alternatively, you've got things like Mongo or Cassandra, where no SQL databases, where they're quite freeform. You can kind of throw anything up there, and they don't have to fit a certain structure. But then it makes potentially querying more difficult. But there's kind of trades-offs in either way. It really depends the kind of use case that you need. But you don't necessarily need to know all of these. But I've never used Postgres, for example. But an understanding of the differences between them is really useful. On top of that, testing. Obviously, you've built something, you want to make sure that it works. You've got different types of testing that allow you to test different parts of the application. And then you've got things like continuous delivery and continuous integration, which basically allow you to automate testing. So you can basically build your suite of tests. When you add a new piece of functionality, you can basically flick a switch, it'll run through all of the tests that you've done across the rest of the website and find out that what you put here is actually broken something here. So then before it goes out into development or into production, you can fix that, run the suite of tests again, and you're happy. And again, it's all part of the development life cycle of making sure that things are tested properly. And then obviously it's going to sit on a server for people to be able to view. That might be on Linux, it might be on Windows. If it's on Linux, there's different flavors of Linux that you can use. They're all essentially the same, but it'll be in a way what your preference is or what a company's preference is to use those. But again, just an understanding that there are different types out there that offer slightly different things is useful. And then the web server, so the piece of software that serves up the website on the server. Again, there's different ones. Microsoft IIS runs on Windows machines, Apache and Nginx runs on Linux. And again, just an understanding of what they do at a fundamental level is good. But don't panic. There is even more than that going on, obviously, from a things to learn point of view. But it's important to work out, I don't need to learn all of that. Going back a slide. I don't know all of that. I know some of bits of those, and that's all I need to be able to do what I do. But it's important to be aware of the other things that are out there and the route that you want to go in your development path. For example, you might say, okay, I need to build an app. I'll build it in PHP. I'll use Laravel as the base framework. I'll pull in some additional bits that I need from Composer, and it'll run on SQL because that's all I need. And there you go. You've got a fully working app just using those elements there. In terms of resources, when I was learning to do stuff, these were some of the ones I used. I think there's more and more free stuff available now than there ever has been. It's not to say that the paid stuff isn't worth it, but it's always worth getting stuff. Obviously, generally, you might say the quality on the paid stuff might be better, but it's definitely worth. I Googled so much when I was learning to code. In terms of being a developer, I love it. It's something that I want to do for the rest of my working life. We build new software from scratch. We're always looking out for the next best thing in terms of building new things. We maintain existing software. We do different things, and every day, because we've got so many different websites and different things we look after, is always something different. And because because things are always changing, it's never getting stale for me. There's always something to learn, always something to look forward to. In terms of you guys, I think I'm on time for this. It is important to learn. As a developer, you will need to commit to a lifetime of learning. It's not something you'll be able to learn off the bat. Even when you get comfortable with a language or with a framework or something, there'll be something else that comes along that might supersede it, or something that you may need to learn or something you just want to add to your collection of skills to be able to do something else. Because the same tools won't be necessarily always the best tools to use for every single project. Persist. When you do learn something new, sometimes it'll be similar to something you've learned before and you'll be able to pick it up really quickly. Sometimes it'll be completely different. It will take you a long time, but eventually, once you do pick it up, it will help you learn other things. So it's important to persist and get stuck in. One thing I really found was if I'm doing the tutorials along with watching them, I was making mistakes and having to work out why it wasn't working. And then it turns out that you learn a lot more, I found, doing it that way at least, rather than just watching them. And looking ahead, so this industry, the marketing industry as a whole, but development especially, is moving really quickly. There's new plugins, new frameworks coming out all the time. Some of them will fall by the wayside, some of them never happen, never go anywhere, but it's important to keep an eye on things, on trends and what people are using. The big boys, Facebook, released React, Google have released several over the years. They're committed to releasing new technology, so it's important to keep an eye on it. And it is the future. Number of internet users, even since 2007, has almost, well, has doubled. And it is part of everything we do now. Everything we do is on the internet. Everything we do uses software, social media, banking, shopping. And we need people to build the pieces of software that all of this runs on. So it is a career that is going to be only getting stronger in the future. In terms of you guys and what you do next, I suppose, moving on from what we were talking about in the hall earlier, university or self-teach, I suppose is the obvious two. In terms of who I've worked with in my career as a developer, it's probably 50-50. And even the people that have been to university haven't necessarily studied a computer science course. Some have done media or marketing, so it's not essential. It really depends how your brain works, I suppose, what you're interested in, and whether you want to go down the university or self-teach route. University is great because it will cover things that you won't necessarily cover on your own, so it gives you a better idea and it will give you better theory and better grounding in a way, so when you then pick up languages later on, you understand how they work, whereas potentially in self-teach you might jump into something a bit easier. But on the other side, self-teach, if you know that you want to be an Angular developer, or you know roughly where you want to go, you can get rid of all the other stuff that doesn't really matter, and in a way, and really focus on the elements that you want to learn. So it's really, again, there's no right or wrong answer to it. It can go either way. It's really down to you and how you see your path moving, I suppose. And that's about it. In a nutshell. That's all right.
Anybody? Yes.
Cheers.
Anybody got any questions for Mike? Anything that you'd like to find out that you didn't even ask?
Did it make sense? Good. I know I speak quite quickly, so cool. Sure? Anything? Nothing? Good. Go for it.
So when you started doing work as a code transition from everything else you've done in IT, how long would you say it took for you before things again start to fit together and things kind of click?
I mean, I was lucky that I was doing it while I was doing my other job. My other job had quietened down, so I did quite a lot at work, which was naughty, but at the same time, it was really useful. So I was able to spend quite a lot of time. It wasn't just, a few hours here in the evenings that I was able to. So I suppose it, in a way, to start with, it was one of those ones where I was butting my head up against the wall. And as soon as I got a few core concepts, it was almost a eureka moment. I was like, right, I understand the scope of what I can start building now. And there is, even now, there's things that will come along and I'm like, I just don't understand how this works, or, what's the point of it even? And then you just need to get stuck in. And sometimes it might take 5 minutes, sometimes it might take a couple of weeks before you actually go, okay, that makes sense. I'm going to use that as my next project. So it really depends. I think the first grounding, the first getting your head over the main, in a way like PHP or ISP, once you've got your grounding in that, that'll give you a massive benefit to anything you learn further on, because they will all be based on the same principles of variables or constants or functions. Everything kind of follows that core. So once you've got that core understanding, it will help you with anything you learn prior to that. So if you are struggling to start with, just persevere, because I think the first learning curve with anything development-wise is the hardest. Once you're over that hump, it will become easier.
I think just to add to that, if you do decide to go down a self-taught route, or if you are at university looking at your own self-learning, choose a language or a framework that suits what kind of field you want to go into, but then stick with that and make sure you learn the essentials, because it's very easy, because there's just so much material. You end up kind of hopping. You do 5 minutes of one video, look at another video for 5 minutes, and actually they're two completely different technologies, and you haven't really learned that much in those 5 minutes. Just pick a technology you think works for you, and there is no wrong decision, because there's plenty of jobs available for each one, and as Mike said, most of them you can pretty much do most things. So pick a technology, stick to it, make sure you really get into detail with that, so that when it comes around to applying for a job, you've got enough knowledge, and if someone asks you to learn another skill, you still know the core concepts, and you can easily then translate from what you know to what you don't know.
Yeah, and the core thing is really just build stuff, like just play with it, break stuff, make stuff. If you can think of an idea, the best way that I found of actually putting stuff into practice was just think of an idea, even if it's banal or something, just build something and have an idea of what you want it to do at the end. And then once you got to that journey, you've got an app that works, then yeah, it's after that, once you've kind of mastered that and you've brought all different elements into it, then you can look at